The ML Sports Platter back with you all over the major platforms. Download, subscribe, rate, and review as we are brought to you by our good friends at Stanley Law Offices, Rosie's Corner in Bern Dairy. Gas up your vehicles today at participating locations in and around Central New York. Bern Dairy, it's all good. And I know this guy loves his coffee and donuts on the way into work at Bern Dairy as well. We bring him back onto the show, but we have his face this time. It's my man, Syracuse lacrosse great, Charlie Lockwood. We're going to talk some hoops. ACC tournament, SU with a huge win on the lax field against Johns Hopkins. He's going to break it all down. What's up, Lock?
How you doing today, Mike?
I'm good. This is better, right? You like this? A little engagement?
Yeah. It's like you said, I'm like right next to you. We're having a conversation. It feels
Exactly. Yeah, we spent 17 hours trying to get Charlie's computer. No, I'm just kidding. But technology can be a bitch. Let's face facts. All right, I'm starting with lacrosse. I know that the ACC tournament's going on. People are going to hear this, let's see, on, really the day of when Syracuse plays. And we got the quarterfinal games, which are going to be fine and all that. But the first day or two of the ACC tournament, give me a break. It's not going to really get going until the first couple days. Lacrosse won a thriller. And when I saw the score, I was in and out of things and scores. It was just a busy day. And I said to myself, in my head, I asked myself, is this the one? Are they back? It's the rivalry. Gate gets his big win, right? Almost kind of like Red got his signature win against Carolina on the hardwood for the basketball court. And you and I, we text all the time, and you say they're back. You said they were back. They just needed a couple of big wins. It doesn't get any bigger than Hopkins, right? So they're all the way back now until the schedule continues to get harder. Where are we at?
I wouldn't say we're all the way back, Mike, because remember, we live in this this lacrosse crazed town where there's only one thing that matters, right? It's a gold trophy, as Coach Simmons used to tell us back in the day. That means the last team standing on Memorial Weekend. But with parity in lacrosse, it's been 10 years, Mike, since Syracuse has been to a Final Four. In lacrosse years, that's like 100, okay? So, being back, we got to put this in perspective. Gary Gates been coaching now 2.5 years, we'll call it, right? That's by far his biggest win for a couple of reasons. Number one, it was one against a top 5 opponent at a neutral location, which is great. So no one can say it was the Dome. Obviously it would have been better if it was at Hop, but it was at a neutral location, and it was a 1-goal game. Gary has been in a few of these games now, including 2 this season, where they seem to always be on the short end of the stick here recently in the last couple of years. It was a big, big win for many reasons. Again, top 10, top 5 win, but they won a close game, Mike. That gives them confidence and a lot of good experience when they head into what I would call the real meat grinder part of their schedule right now. Mike, they have Delaware, Duke, Notre Dame, Cornell, UNC, and Virginia. Nobody else in the country can say what I just said. That's 6 games, right?
Yeah.
Here's the good news, though. They go 3-3 in them. So say they split them, right? They're still in the tournament.
Correct.
Because their strength of schedule is crazy high.
Great. Yeah.
And now they got a signature win at Hopkins at a neutral site. So even a couple of blemishes, which I think all those teams are going to experience some losses, not just Syracuse. I think they're still in. Whereas if you had asked me that 3 weeks ago before, I think the last time you and I spoke was before the Maryland game. They lost to Maryland. They lost to Army. Mm-hmm. And in my head, I was like, okay, if they lose a few of these out-of-conference games and then they got to go through the ACC, there's a chance, small, but they might not make the tournament because of how it sets up and there's no ACC automatic qualifier, right? So now I'm saying I think they're probably a shoo-in to get in, as long as they don't fall apart. They can't go 1-5, 2-4 in those last 6. I said 3-3,
Yeah.
So, they go 500. I think they're in, but I think the bottom line is those young kids on the team are growing up real fast. And that win against Hop on a neutral site was absolutely huge for the coaching staff and the kids.
So I had lunch with my dad a couple of weeks ago, and who walks in? Matt Palin. So we started, doing our thing, and I know you and Matt know each other well. And I was like, hey, what do you think of the team? He's like, we're back. Matt's, so he's always energetic, and we're back. It's always, if it's SU, they're back. If it's anything
before the coffee hit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and that's, by the way, could you imagine me drinking coffee? I've never had a cup in my life.
Mike, me neither, brother.
Although here we are. But
Me too, brother.
yeah, and I really need to probably go down 75% at least in the intake of that. But 4-year-old and 7-month-old, and the drill. You did that a long time ago.
Yeah.
But Maddie's Maddie, and I love the guy, and just like you, and consider him a friend like you. And he's always like that. He's gung ho. They're back. I love it. But we started talking a little bit more, and he was telling me, a little bit of what we've talked about in terms of back. So I know what the expectations are. I know being back, and you're saying the gold trophy. I think even a Final Four berth this year would be an awesome year for Syracuse. I really do, because I think the analogy over to the hoops team, we'll get to them in a minute, where it's that every year tournament for hoops, Sweet 16 every couple, and then a little bit deeper every 5 years, the Final Four every 6 to 8 to 9. The stuff that you talked about last show with me was outstanding, because I'm right in line with you, and I shared that with a lot of my listeners and viewers. But with the lacrosse thing back part, take me through the gap, right? Because if they're almost back, then there's back. There's tournament good to Final Four good. There's Final Four good to championship good. Great, elite. Gap to gap to gap, who they have, face-off guys. They've got a superstar. Looks like there's more depth. Where does it, okay, that gap is done, closed now, this one, you know what I mean? Like, take me down in chunks, and also the way the game's played today with the difficult schedule. How do you close and go and close and go and close and go to get here?
So if you're a Syracuse lacrosse player, recruited, understanding the pressure, understanding the history. If you're a Syracuse fan that's been right here in the Syracuse area, and you've seen it over the last 20, 30 years, seen the success, okay? Nothing less, Mike. So we're going 0 to 100 here in 5 seconds, because the program hasn't gone to a tournament, right, for the last 2 years, which is
Right.
just outrageous in most
Mind-boggling.
people's minds. Just, you can't even fathom that, right? So now we have a team that's sort of lit a fire under everyone, including the fan base. And now the expectation, Mike, let's go deep into the playoffs. So this
Okay.
is a little bit different than basketball, because I think it's more of all the gold trophies that have been accumulated, the history, and now you got some superstars on the team. You got this young, exciting group. You got Gary Gate getting his first big win. Mike, I swear to God, snap of a finger, overnight, the fans are now thinking probably deep run, if not Final Four.
Okay, so that is okay. So because that's where I was going to go next with like the gap. So the fans are actually in now. Because I'm not up there as much for lacrosse as I am with basketball, where I can get a pulse of it. And sometimes I go off in halftime and talk to fans. Obviously, I see at least 30 to 40 people I know. So I see a lot of friends at the games and all that. I'm at a couple lacrosse games here and there. I've got the women coming up this Saturday. I was supposed to have the men, but for one game, but my kid was sick that weekend. I couldn't work the game. But I usually get a pulse, right? I'll walk around, I'll at least see if I know somebody, or just start chatting. So you're telling me people are in, the fan base is back in.
They are. And Mike, if you think about this entire Syracuse University athletics as a whole, between football, basketball, and lacrosse, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about it, Mike. What did that look like in the 90s and the early 2000s? Like, when I was in school, football was going to big bowls. Basketball was a shoe-in almost for a Sweet 16. And then lacrosse was booking their Final Four, reservations the year before. Okay? A lot has changed over the last 20, 25 years. But I think that if you're just a fan of Syracuse sports and a Syracuse lacrosse fan, this has sparked you. Like I said, we've gone 0 to 100 in 5 seconds. We got the big win, and now the expectations have just gone up about 10 notches, Mike. And then guess what? When you're recruited to play lacrosse at Syracuse, right?
Yeah.
That's part of the job description. That's part of the pressure that you take on as a player. That's why Joey Spallina and those type of kids come to Syracuse. They want to experience that, and they expect the pressure. So guess what? Now they have that pressure on their back.
Yeah, so it's interesting, because if the fans are bought in and there's superstars on the program, and you've got arguably the greatest player of all time coaching the team, is there a feeling that, again, NIL transfer portal world that we're in too, and you'd mentioned like back in the 80s and 90s how things have changed. Things haven't changed on the Hill as much as they've changed overall in the landscape of all college sports. Even prior to NIL transfer portal, now we got this crap to deal with. But a superstar or 2 or 3 on the team. So, I mean, is there a feeling of like, cool, this is neat, like expectations now, but man, I don't know if they can sustain this because of the climate. You know, I mean, back then it was, oh, we got this club and we've got the Gates for another 2 years, right? Or we
Yeah,
got Mikey Powell, and look, he
it's
just won a tour. Oh, he's going to be back
no,
next. You know what I
no,
mean?
Mike.
Like there is that whole like, oh, feeling,
Okay.
right?
No, it's actually it's an interesting point that you talk about, and I don't think people are talking about it enough. That it almost seems like sports today, Mike, at the collegiate level, are almost year to year.
Yeah.
And
Well, it is.
and
Everybody's a
so for
free agent.
lacrosse, for instance, we
Yeah.
got a great face-off kid, right? That came from Tufts.
Yep.
You want to talk about an awesome story, Mike? This kid hadn't even played lacrosse the last 2 years. He went to Tufts so he could play hockey and lacrosse. His main sport at Tufts was hockey. He's got a ton of tread on his tires. Okay, he's a lacrosse guy, lacrosse face-off guy. Against Hopkins, I think they were like 22 or 23 out of 31, 32. Dominated, right? That's the huge difference between last year and this year. Like when we played Hopkins last year, we were 50-50.
You could
When we played,
Charlie, you got to have
make it
possession.
take it.
You,
Mike, make it take it. Score a goal, get the ball back.
yeah, you got to have possession to do anything.
Yeah. So to answer your question, it'd be great if the kid was like a freshman or sophomore and we could be like, damn, we got this kid for another 3 years. He's here for 1 year, Mike.
Yeah.
So a lot can change over the next 12 months. That's why my message to all these kids, do not think because Joey Spallina is a sophomore, you got 2 more years. You have to play like your life depends on it this year,
Yeah. Hair on
not
fire.
next year or the year after.
Yep. Yeah, hair on fire. Again, it doesn't matter if if you are transferring in and you have 1 year, or if you are a freshman. You have everybody is literally as either a senior because mentally, because they can go anywhere after 1 year, so they could be a senior mentality, or you could be a one and done mentality from college basketball. You could be because everybody's one and done. Technically, you could be one and done because of the portal and the NIL stuff, which is just insane. I mean, some people are leaving for only portal. Some people leave because of the NIL and they enter the portal. Sometimes it's both. It's craziness, but that's the world we're in right now. I got one more on lacrosse. We'll transfer it over to basketball after this. So when you look at you talk about the eye tests in sports, and you know all about that. When you see a team like Clemson, Syracuse in basketball, we've talked about Clemson's a much better team when you look at both of them, but you look at wins, you look at losses, you look at quality wins, you look at the ACC. It's very similar, the records, but the teams are kind of apart, right? Clemson's better, and they beat Cuse twice. Look test, miles better Clemson. When you have the look test with Syracuse, what do you see? I mean, do you see the run and gun in orange from days ago? Do you see comparisons from other clubs, the way Gate has them playing? Do you see them close to other powerhouses? What does the look test look like in terms of the scheme of lacrosse, the model, I should say, of what lacrosse looks like today, and even how Syracuse lacrosse has been played in the past? Look test, are they passing it?
Okay, so a couple things there, Mike. Look test. If I were to do the quick look test on Syracuse, they have a great goalie, they have a great face-off guy, and now they obviously have a superstar in Joey Spallina on the attack. So they have three really important pieces. As far as everything else goes, like, and I hate to do this, but over the last, 10, 15, 20 years, Syracuse has been known as a team that has thoroughbreds that get up and down the field. It's a fast pace, and they out athlete you.
Pass,
Okay.
pass, score. Pass, pass, score.
Okay. And,
Yeah.
and sometimes, Mike, and I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but maybe even not pass, score. Maybe just get the ball, go by your guy and score. Okay.
Either way.
Now, this
Yeah.
year, the difference, and I think most people would agree, Paul Carcaterra says this all the time on ESPN when he's talking about Syracuse, and I agree with him 100%. This is the most skilled team I've ever seen Syracuse have. And skill, there's a big difference between, Mike, being able to hit guys and finish rather than a thoroughbred pulls it out. Everyone in the stadium knows what he's going to do with it. He's going to take his guy.
Mhm.
Oh, another guy's going to double you. I'm going to go by that guy too. And then I'm going to shoot at 100 miles an hour into the cage. I can take two guys on. I don't need to pass it to anyone else, right? Syracuse University, or Syracuse lacrosse this year, Mike, is built different than that. They get the ball around. They're cerebral. They have Canadian finishers. So you throw a guy like Joey Spallina in the mix, right? That's smart. He has IQ. That's the big word everyone uses. he puts it to the right people that can finish it, and they're crafty, Mike. They're smart. They're crafty. It's different than the old Syracuse teams, but just as effective because the ball's going in the back of the net.
See, I know a little bit about obviously lacrosse, but nothing close to basketball, football, golf, right? Hockey. And you just described, I know you know who Connor McDavid is for the Oilers. Like that,
Yeah.
to me, you just described the Oilers because he'll go around and around and then a bang and he'll fly up. Or they're on a power play and it's just like, you're just sitting like this, give me my popcorn. And you just watch the movie and you're like, oh my, and it's him to Kane to Drysdale, back out, Hyman, doom, McDavid passes it across, bang, score. That's what you're saying. You're saying it's tic-tac-toe again and tic-tac-toe again, tic-tac-toe again, and then a goal. But it's up here, it's here with the hands, it's everywhere. And then the finishing result is boom in the net. I love it. I like that they're doing it that way.
Yeah, and well, listen, it's harder to make a living, Mike, relying on 2 or 3 thoroughbreds from up top that actually have to sacrifice their bodies to get to the cage and consistently put it in. I'll tell you who used to do that. Gary and Paul Gate.
Yeah.
Okay, you didn't need to pass it around 5, 6 times, Mike.
Well, they're jumping, you're jumping over the goal.
You give it to one guy and they go, right? So
Yeah.
listen, it's exciting to me because it does show their level of skill.
Mhm.
But to me, like you just mentioned, McDavid, these guys, the guys at the upper levels like that, Mike, they project out. They're seeing 2 or 3 plays ahead.
Exactly.
Just like in lacrosse, they're seeing 2 or 3 passes ahead.
Mhm.
And that's what makes this offense really downright scary. That's why if you have a face-off guy that can go 60, 70, 80%, the other team's going to have a hard time keeping up.
Yeah, that's why when you're guarding somebody and you're facing the Showtime Lakers, Magic's like, he doesn't know that I'm going to give it to Michael Cooper over here. He thinks I'm going to give it to Worthy or I'm going to give it to Jabbar.
It's a game within a game.
Yeah. He sees it's like the pool player. The 2 shots ahead. They make 2 to get to the third one, but they see it before they make the 2 shots.
That's Syracuse offense right now, lacrosse offense.
That's an awesome description. Charlie Lockwood here, Syracuse lacrosse great on the ML Sports Platter. Brought to you by our good friends over at Stanley Law Offices and Brian Comboy at Mass Mutual, New York State. Hey, get your tax-efficient retirement planning today with Brian at advisors.massmutual.com. So to hoops for maybe, 7 to 10 minutes, Charlie, if you have time. I said this in a show this week and some videos that if you weren't going to beat Clemson to close the year, which they didn't, and you get into the ACC bracket, you go from the double bye opportunity down, where are you, right? You're going to be top bracket, bottom bracket. How do the matchups look? Where's the best opportunity to try to make that run to at least get squarely on the bubble, which is where I think they would have been if they had beaten Clemson, right? I mean, I think you would agree. If they had beaten Clemson, they'd be squarely on the bubble. You win 1, maybe 2, you're probably in unless a lot of cookies crumble against you elsewhere, more automatic bids, all the BS that happens this time of year in college basketball. I happen to think, let me see if you agree with me. I like Syracuse's spot because you avoid North Carolina up top, the best team in the conference. You have an NC State team probably that wins over Louisville. They have good guards. They could easily beat Syracuse, sure. But I like the matchup because I think SU can neutralize them in every which way, and they can outscore them. And SU's offense, I think, is pretty good and has been good all year. Then you get a Duke team. Why not? I'd rather play Duke than Carolina, and Duke's going in. They're falling all over the place. Bad look, throwing trash at Carolina players. Filipowski pulling the Grayson Allen, trying to trip Harrison Ingram. Why not? Let's say you beat Duke. Then the next game, Clemson might be there, but you got to beat Cuse 3 times in a season. We know how that goes. And then you got a bad offense in Virginia. Virginia can take you out with their defense and their slow things. They put you to sleep. But I'm willing to take my chances on a 59 to 57 Cuse win there. I'd rather be right where they are than up top. What do you say?
Mike, so what you just described is you'd rather be anywhere in those brackets on the opposite side of North Carolina, and I agree with you. North Carolina is the best team. In my opinion, North Carolina is the team in the ACC that can go to a Final Four and win it.
They can win the whole thing. And we have another layer on the top bracket. Pittsburgh. SU Pittsburgh always has, SU beat them twice this year, by the way. That we're not even going to talk about analytics, Ken Pom and net, because for some reason those Pitt
we can if you want.
No, we'll be here for no. I'll have to text my wife and tell her that I'm not coming to dinner, but I might be cooking dinner, so maybe I have to be there. But Pittsburgh, those are 2 pretty good wins to me. They're a double bye team. I don't want to try, you don't want to try to beat them 3 times in a season either. So you avoid
Right.
Carolina and the Pittsburgh thing.
Mike, to me, this is what makes college basketball one of the most exciting and watched sports ever. And it'll always be this way because
Yep.
everyone knows basketball, Mike, that Syracuse right now, they're not dead in the water, but let's just say they got to do something pretty miraculous to put themselves into the tournament. But guess what?
It's there.
Everyone that's competitive, Mike, and that loves Cuse and loves basketball, guess what their mentality should be right now? They have a chance.
Yes, right.
You know what? It's better than not having a chance.
Yep.
They're going to the ACC tournament, like you said. The first round matchup it's favorable for Syracuse, no matter who they play, right?
Mhm.
And then if they got Duke, I watched that North Carolina Duke game. Guess what? North Carolina went into Duke and did that to them. Duke is good. Listen, they still got the 5-star guys all over the place. North Carolina is the best team that I've seen in the ACC this year. That's a team you don't want to play in the second round.
Right.
You never know with Cuse. If they win 3 games and even get to a championship, maybe don't complete the sweep.
Right.
Who knows, Mike? Because you know what? There's other variables. There's other teams that are also on the bubble around the country. Say they lay an egg. So other teams lay eggs somewhere else.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what you need, it'd be, I mean, technically, yeah, it'd be second round for Cuse, third round overall of the ACC because you got 4,000 teams in the conference now. By the way, enjoy the ACC tournament this year before SMU and Cal and Stanford are in the conference. Are you kidding me?
That's insane.
Oh, God. But, I got to tell you, the teams on the first day, and people are going to hear this after the first day, but you know what? Like Syracuse isn't Georgia Tech. I mean, that first day, you look at all those clubs and you go, there's not one of those teams that can win 5 games in 5 days. The only one that you might think, if I had to pick one, maybe it's Miami because of last year's pedigree. Maybe, but I don't think it is. NC State, really good guard play. Probably by default, I would pick them. But Syracuse isn't one of those clubs. They don't have to win 5 in 5 days. They're in a spot where they can beat NC State. Now, remember, Louisville, that game at the Dome came down to the final possession, but that's college basketball. A lot of those teams on the first day, they win a huge game, but the sustainability, the body of work, it's not there. The body of work is in the quarterfinal teams and a little bit in the round before. By the way, can you believe Miami? Gosh, they were 11-2 to start the season. Last year made the run to the Final Four. They finished 4-14. That's not Syracuse. Syracuse beat them at the Dome on the quad-ear buzzer beater. So I think Syracuse, for not beating Clemson, the best possible scenario is here. I will tell you, there are a lot of balls in the air still. They have a chance. You said it best. Roll it out, see what happens. But I think Cuse has to win it, or depending on what happens around them, maybe you can get to the championship game and compete a little bit and lose and get in if a few things work in your favor around you. For example, A10, you got to have Dayton win it or Richmond win it. You can't have Bonnies can feel free to win it, but you can't have a third team go in there and steal that bid, right? You can't have another one from those kind of things. If SU does that, I don't know, man.
Mike, I think this would be fair if the expectations for the Syracuse basketball fan and community are that it's a long shot to probably get into the tournament. So let's start there as a base, okay? We know what's ahead of us. Right now we're behind the 8 ball a little bit, right? But what would be really cool, Mike, is if Syracuse can give this community, and for themselves too, not just the community, but for themselves, if they could go in and win a couple games and scratch, fight, claw, everything they got, right? I think people respect that, Mike, and people can buy into that for the future as well. It's just when you get beat by 20 or 30 and the body language looks bad and all that stuff, they can't afford that either. Mike, they can't afford that either.
Yeah, I know. You're right. You're like the second half runoff by Carolina Duke. It's Carolina Duke, but it still looked bad. The road games, I mean, goodness, those road games, the second half, the 4 games I think that this season is, if they don't make the tournament, the 4 games, if you had just gone 2-2 in these games, Georgia Tech, Wake, BC, and then at home, they got rolled against Florida State. That game was close in the first half. Florida State had a horrific season, but they mopped the floor with Syracuse in that second half. Those 4 games there, you look at it and go, man, if you go 2-2 there, Q's probably, is in, or if they just win the one, they're in.
22-8, it looks a lot different.
That's what I'm saying. And then if you win 1 in the ACC and lose to Duke, what are you going to say? Oh, they lost to Duke.
Okay. No, you're in.
Yeah.
So anyways, My hope is that they make it exciting for all of us, Mike,
Yeah.
and give us something to be proud of. The product.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you. Um, I got one more, and then I'm done. And it's not about the hoops and lacrosse seasons this year. I've been wanting to ask you this question for a long time, and I've saved it in my back pocket, and I did not forget. And I wanted to do it when we were on screen because I want to see the emotion in your face when I ask this question. When you got on the campus of Syracuse University, who was the first player or maybe a couple player? I mean, you were an unbelievable lacrosse player in your own right. You're in the Hall of Fame, for God's sakes. But who was the first player or maybe a couple players while you were on campus at Syracuse? Not an opponent. It could be a teammate, obviously, or in another sport where you were in freaking awe. Because, I mean, you grew up here, you watched people, but then, like, in front of you, you were in awe.
So Mike, this isn't, maybe this isn't going to surprise some of the people that were, with me and around me in Syracuse, but like, Mike, I got up there. You remember, I lived with Hop and Scotty McCorkle. Okay, I lived with I lived with some basketball guys as well. So
Yep.
being around guys like John Wallace and Lawrence Moten for starters, okay, two of the best ever,
Yep.
right? So these are guys that I'm friends with, and I
Yeah.
had the luxury of meeting my next door neighbor, Mike, for a year was Cadre Ismail. Okay,
Right. The missile.
so lacrosse was well documented. I was in awe, and I had heroes all my life. But to get up there and be around big time football and basketball, because at
Right.
the time that's what it was, Mike.
Oh,
It was big time. And to be around John Wallace, Lawrence Moten, I would say those guys, Ismail, um, you know,
on the quad with Quadri, man. You remember that? Remember that show?
all those things.
The
These
missile.
guys were just heroes. Donovan McNabb, Marvin Graves. I mean, come on. These aren't just SU figures. These are some of the best to ever do it. And I was actually lucky, Mike, because during that time, that's when it was. That was probably the pinnacle. Like if you're looking back on it now, that's probably the pinnacle of all three sports.
Yeah.
We're like firing on all cylinders. So
Yeah,
you're
late
around
80s.
all
I,
great people.
I mean, you got it late 80s, early, like the late 80s, not yet. I mean, God, it's hard to split hairs and pick one, right? But it would be either the late 80s when the Lax wins 3 in a row, right?
I'll tell you another guy
And
who I
90.
was just like in awe of, Mike, too, up there was this guy Donovan Darius.
Sure.
You remember him? He strong
Florida
safety, free
safety,
safety.
Jaguars, of
Yeah,
course.
nasty,
Unbelievable player. So
scary.
he would, I
Terry
mean,
Terry Richardson, Rob Conrad.
of course.
Okay,
Yeah.
big time
Darius would
guys.
knock your head off. I remember going to the Dome and seeing him play a ton of times. The first time I saw him as a guy, I was like, he's going to the NFL. I mean, that was a stretch where Cuse was just pumping him, man. You know,
And
Keith Bullet,
I
Darius.
cannot forget Danny Conley too, because if he
Sure,
sees this and I don't mention his name, I'm still scared of him. So
sure.
Danny Conley's the guy too that was NFL all over. Minus 14 knee surgeries.
Yeah, no kidding. We are Facebook friends too, so he might see this and definitely make fun of you. By the way, man, I know how it works, big business. I know I said last question, but you brought up Hop. I mean, geez, I texted him because, I consider him a friend too, and I didn't hear back from him. But have you talked to him since the firing or
Have
no?
not, but I have not. I followed his career really closely, Mike.
Right.
And I don't think anyone that followed, if you followed it, Mike, and you follow college sports just like basketball, just like anyone does, or probably more than most people. The writing was on the wall for Hop for the
I
last two
know.
or 3 years.
I know.
He's been sort of on the hot seat,
Yeah.
and this year was the final nail in the coffin. But he came out hot there at Washington, and then it just progressively sort of fizzled out on him. And
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see what he does next. I think that's the real question, Mike. Where
That
does
is
he
so.
end up? Who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah. I still think a place. I mean, I remember when Bonaventure looked at him when they had the academic fraud thing going on and they fired that clown Jan Van Bredikoff and fired all the administrators and Robert Wickenheiser and all those people when they let Jamil Terrell in with a welder certificate. Trust me, I don't have a welder certificate from Bonas. I have a real freaking journalism degree. It's right in the drawer right down here, believe it or
Prove
not.
it.
I,
Prove it.
I really have it. I can't find it, but see, no, I do. I have it. It's somewhere in here. But what I'm saying is, I remember when I was like, oh, and I texted him, I was like, don't take that job because it's not the job when I was there, just a few years prior with Barron and all that. But I do think that a gig like in the MAC or the A10, where he can kind of just jump in and do it kind of his way and get some players and get them to buy in right away, and go grab a 20-win season, man, I think that might be good,
Mike, I think that's probably his only path. I don't see him showing up at a major Power 5 team
Yeah.
after that situation. He's going to have to like sort of claw his way back, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think he can do it. We know he's got it in his blood. He loves the game and he's a hard worker. So I'm rooting for him because I like him. And we'll see what happens next.
Well, let's root for Red Autry right now.
Well, I know. Yeah. No. We're rooting for Red Autry too. I root for all of them though. You know what I mean? Like
Me too.
I root for all of them. But right now, Cuse, man, we'll see what they do in the tournament. The lacrosse team. Sustainability after a win over Hopkins. My man Charlie Lockwood joining me here on the ML Sports Platter, all brought to you by Stanley Law Offices and Rosie's Corner. Charlie, thanks so much, man. Always enjoy it.
All right, Mike.